Welcome to another episode of the Addiction Help Podcast, the flagship podcast on the Addiction Help Podcast Network. I am your host, Dan Hauser, and today is a very special episode because we are joined by Nikki O'Donnell. And Nikki is a prominent figure in mental health advocacy and community support, recognized for her dedication and innovation approach. She boasts over 20 years of experience as both as a licensed child psychologist, and she is also the co-founder and executive director of Words of Hope for Life, which is a mental health action nonprofit empowering individuals and families to navigate life's challenges with resilience and hope. Oh, and by the way, as if that's not enough, she also owns her own private practice where she specializes in therapy as well as doing speaking engagements and consulting. So, Nikki, thanks so much for joining the show today. At this point, is there anything you don't do? I should say at this point, with everything, is there anything you don't?
Don't do backflips. Oh, that was so nice.
You kind of do metaphorical backflips, though, in terms of everything you do and balancing all your everything you do on a day-to-day basis. So I guess you kind of do mental backflips from that standpoint.
That fair. We'll take that. I have a lot of fun, but absolutely. I mean, the mental health world and advocacy world is just, there's so many opportunities here. And I love getting out and meeting people. And so that's really helped me to grow the network of support and all of the really cool stuff I've been able to do here in Metro Detroit.
So you sent me over your bio. Obviously, it's extensively long. I could spend a significant amount of time just going through all the amazing stuff that you do. But instead of me just rambling on about it, why don't you go ahead and tell the audience and everyone a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got involved in the mental health and addiction field.
Right. So I was the kid that needed the services that I provide now, to be honest. I grew up in a household of secret keepers, and I'm a
So was I, for the record. I was absolutely that kid who needed everything that now I talk about on these podcasts. I was the kid that needed all that stuff growing up too.
Isn't that so funny though? I love that happens, because it can, I usually joke and say, I'm like, it was going to go one of two ways. I was going to either end up in mental health or prison. There's not going to be any in between. And I definitely went this way, but I think a lot of where, I grew up in Metro Detroit, 2-family household, parents. My dad was injured when I was really, really young. He was he's a welder, a fabricator. He was when I grew up, and he helped build the Silver Dome and the Detroit Zoo and all these different really fun things. But he injured his back and was prescribed opiates back in the 90s. And that was it. My mom was in a car accident, same story. So it was like, and as a child, now I do a lot of outreach for kids whose parents are struggling with addiction. And it's so interesting because I had no idea that was what was happening when I was a kid. And I was having all of these experiences and feelings, but children don't have the language to express it. So it just comes out in behavior. So I was a born people pleaser. That codependency situation at home was real, real strong. And I think that primed me getting a little bit older. Right around the time I was 13, I lost my grandfather to suicide. And again, we were a family of secret keepers. So I didn't even really know what happened. And so piecing things together in my own journey of finding community, that's really, I always wanted a place to feel like I could be. Now in my life, I call it the third place. So I do a lot of work now creating a third place in our community, but really all people need 3 places. We need hopefully home, feel safe, hopefully maybe school or work, and then we need a third place. And if we don't have those other 2, then we really need the third place. But that sort of led me into, I threw myself into school. So I got out of the house. I went away to school to Albion College and studied psychology, really found community there. It's a very small private school. So the community there is real, real tight, but I made a lot of really incredible connections and friendships that really lasted me into adulthood. So I, to stay out of trouble was like, better go to grad school now, do something like that here. And then that really led me into really where my passion lies. So what started out as just I want to be a therapist and I want to talk to people and help, really, really blossomed over the years into, more than just a one-on-one situation. I want to be out in the community. People are incredible. Their stories are incredible. And if I can just, elevate and highlight the other things that people are doing and sharing, I feel like so much healing happens there. So I've had my hands in lots of things. I've worked in inpatient, outpatient, community advocacy. I work in the school systems, anywhere that there's like been a need that I have a lot of curiosity. So I really ask a lot of questions and spend a lot of time with youth. And I think that's really just helped form. After 2020 happened, working one-on-one with clients looked a lot different. So it was virtual, and our brain doesn't react the same when we're talking to somebody virtually than when we do online. And so that disconnection really fired me up, and that's when the nonprofit really got going. I love to call it my passion project, but I really just think it's what I'm supposed to do, really. I connect with so many incredible, inspiring people. And though I feel like sometimes like I'm getting all this credit, but like it's not all me. Like there are so many people in my world that I just really love to kind of like be the beacon of light to shine on them, and hopefully use that to really make change in how we do things, whether it's with mental health or harm reduction. I'm just really passionate about that. So that's where we find me today, running this nonprofit, and then my little solo practice here, because I still will always love to see clients, and really finding needs in my community that I think can be met by this community approach that I take to mental health. So we've gotten ourselves into a lot of really fun trouble doing it that way. But we definitely take a different approach. So I think that's what people really are excited about when they hear that we're putting on an event or we're doing something exciting in the community.
Yeah, we're gonna get into all that more here in 1 second. But really quick, you mentioned something when you were talking about your childhood and your upbringing. Secret keepers. What exactly is that? I'm not familiar with that. If you can even share, obviously the name would imply that you may not be able to tell a lot about that. But
so we use this in mental health language to talk about how when you have generational trauma that's just passed down from generation, whether it's abuse or, just emotional situations and issues in the past that have never really been dealt with or felt, they all just kind of get brushed under the rug. People get really good at just keeping secrets. So on the outside, you have a family that looks perfect. I mean, we looked great. The house, the everything, the trampoline, all the things, which makes for really good secret keepers, because you don't know what's going on the inside. But then you get kids who have this, it's like cognitive dissonance. They're like, all right, I everyone's telling me everything's okay, but like something doesn't feel right. And so we start asking a lot of questions, and then that comes out in behavior. So the secret keeping, and I'm sure a lot of families can relate to this, that the kids that are growing up and really just are aware, but don't have the language or understanding, and don't have parents, in my parents and beyond generation, they weren't given tools to deal. A lot of it is, we just don't talk about that, or you're okay, right? And it's like, there is no other answer than, yeah, I'm fine. So yeah, like a lot of us, I think this generation of truth tellers is looking back and saying like, we can talk about this stuff now. Like it's not as hard as maybe it's been built up over generations to be, but it takes a lot. It does take a lot. And usually it's a lot of pain. I find a lot of the folks that I connect with or who have history of addiction or come from that sort of unit of family like I did are the truth tellers. And when things they aren't matching up, the outsides and the insides, how do we cope with that? And especially if we're young, well, we'll reach for whatever we need, to feel better and to make sense of it all. So I think that's a lot of where that secret keeper mentality comes from.
That's very interesting, because I feel like all of us experience that, maybe not to certain levels of extreme growing up, but I feel like all of us as kids, we don't fully understand what's going on out in the world. And so we see at home and it's like, oh yeah, everything's great, because that's all we can comprehend at that age. And as we get older, we realize, well, wait a minute, maybe things weren't as all peachy and sunshine and rainbows as we thought it was when we were younger. It's also interesting you bring that up too. And we're going to talk about this a lot more here in a little bit, because this obviously happened in your backyard, unfortunately. But as this story of the Oxford high school shooter has been playing out in the news, and now the parents are standing trial, and we just had the mom's trial. We very quickly during that trial learned that, just like what you said, the parents kept telling him, yeah, you're fine. Nothing's wrong with you. You're okay, right? Yeah, you're okay. And he wasn't okay. And he was telling his friends and other people, hey, I'm not okay, but I can't tell my parents I'm not okay because they're just not going to accept it. So I think that's very interesting, especially the timing of a lot of what's going on in the world right now, especially post-COVID, that you bring that up, because unfortunately, I think that is still happening far too often than it should be, considering how far we've come as a society.
Right. And it's so, Dan, it's so one of those things where it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I it tears me apart because I wish that wasn't the case, but it's sort of like, I liken it to like the closet that you just keep shoving things in and the rest of the house can look clean. But like one day you open it up and it just all comes tumbling out. But then you could really see what's there. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. So it's things like this talk or, the things that are happening in the world where we're really looking and taking a deeper look at that, that's going to allow us to sort of sort things out together.
So transitioning here to a little bit more positive things. So you mentioned your non-for-profit, yes. Words of Hope for Life. Tell us a little bit about that. How did that come about, and what do you all do as far as day-to-day in that organization?
Okay. So this is kind of a fun story. When I was, I have no shame in my game. I'm in my 40s. And so when I was a teenager, growing up in Metro Detroit, the punk rock scene was huge, right? Alternative music. This was the days of when Sum 41 was at Warp Tour. If anybody's familiar with Warp Tour, it was this, are you? Yay! Yay!
I went to various Warp Tours and Lollapaloozas. Oh yeah, I was that same punk rock kid. So absolutely.
Yes, there was a community there. I found community there. What was really unique is, obviously it was this alternative music tour, band sponsored it. They would go all over the place. They brought in these huge skate ramps. I don't skate, but I like to watch it. But they had music, and it was just a really incredible experience. It's the first time I ever saw community come together like that from all different walks of life. And it stuck with me. So I would go every year, no matter when it was in Comerica parking lot one year, and we were dying of sweat. And it was just oh my goodness. So as I got older, I really thought, and this was post 2020, how do you bring community together? And it just kept coming back in my mind. What if there was the Warp Tour of mental health? What would that look like? So the kind of the inspiration for this nonprofit came from that experience. It was what if we came up with a concept for a group that could create experiences that aren't just fun and engaging and connecting, but just by experiencing that, you improve your mental health, just by going. Because that's sort of what I think it provided a lot of us kids when we were younger, that music culture experience. Just by going, you left. And a lot of people still, I'm sure, when you leave a good concert, you just feel the energy of the room. And I just kept thinking, why can't we can do that. Maybe we can do that. So from there, we actually, it was sort of reverse engineering the solution. I was working in a clinic at the time, and the clinic owner, his name is Glenn Schwartz. He's my co-founder of Words of Hope for Life. And he's just like me with endless energy and has had his hand. He's the entrepreneur. I'm the psychologist. I didn't have that business side of anything, but he did. So he could reel me in a little bit and help us conceptualize this idea of maybe we can have an event. And maybe bigger than that, maybe we can run a nonprofit that does this all of the time. In any community. Maybe we can do that. Maybe we can provide a different kind of a fresh new idea for how we create mental health in communities and really change culturally how, sort of integrating it into how we experience our community together, whether it's by the events that happen there in the community, what happens in school, just all of those different things. So that sort of led us to where we are now. So now we have a brick and mortar space. It is an old vape shop that I got so lucky during 2020. It's the worst possible place for a community center. Worst. Off of a main road, back in like a medical complex in this little suite, this old vape shop that could not make it there. It was disgusting. We went in, we turned it into this really fun, funky coffee shop vibes space. There's an old lab in there because they were actually making the like vape stuff. So that still exists. And now it's a community art space, but it's proof that literally you can take the worst location possible and create something in a community that will help that community thrive. And I 100% believe it. So we really now work to make that happen as sort of a concept for other communities. And we do that through the events we do in the community. We really strive to meet the needs of right now. We go into the schools, we developed something called mental health ICU, and it was a different way. So a lot of the data, I'm kind of like a data nerd. I love evidence-based, things and approaches, even though I am kind of like really out of the box. But what we were finding, and me as a psychologist, I'm like, man, a lot of the things that exist in even just my community only exist because of 4 questions on one survey that they give kids in 7th and 11th grade. That's it. Everything is based for our county on those 4 questions. So I'm like rolling up to the county. I mean, we really, really worked hard to say, this is post 2020. This is not really the voice of those kids. So we went into schools and we did this live polling experience with them to really ask the questions in real time and find out what those needs are. And it's blowing everybody away, because what we're finding is those top 3 stressors that these kids are experiencing are things like academics is really up there all the time. Family issues and concerns are up there. And then body image. We have no supports. We're throwing a lot of good things at the problem. Like, here's an anxiety group, here's here are some tools, here are some resources, but nothing that like laser focuses on the right now. What these kids need this semester might be different than what they need next year. So we really try to pivot and to move in real time for those supports, because when something like a crisis, when the Oxford shooting happened, I grew up in Lake Orion, in Orion, Oxford, we're connected. So, one of my really close friends, she was a teacher at Oxford, and she knew what I did. And she just, I got the text within hours of the school began lockdown. And she said, please, can you guys come? And it was not even a question, but it's having the platform that we do, we were able to. And we have some really passionate folks that really believe in that work and are able to put that energy forth when we need to. So we really try to tune into what are we actually need here, because every community is so different, and that's vital when you're talking about what kind of supports that you provide.
You mentioned the same 4 questions. What are those 4 questions that they were traditionally asking that you didn't think were getting the right types of or gauging the right types of information out of it?
So what's interesting is it's actually this. So our organization, we're part of the Alliance of Coalitions for Healthy Communities, which is a drug-free communities grant-funded program. And what's neat about that, so they really do try to get a good idea of how communities and kids are affected by substance use, what their attitudes are about it. The issue that I've always had is that it's asking questions that are far more, have you used substances in the past X amount of days? We weren't really asking, I think the only mental health questions. So there were substance abuse and mental health connection related questions. So there wasn't a question like, have you ever thought you were experiencing symptoms of depression or anxiety? Like, do you know somebody? In the past month, have you felt like you didn't want to live anymore? Like, really, like they were afraid to ask those questions. So they were very broad. Have you ever felt sad? Like things that just weren't, it wasn't very mental health informed. So of course,
everybody's felt sad. What is that? That doesn't give you any sort of answer of anything in life.
Exactly. And then it's not really giving us any data that helps us be proactive or to really, find out more or ask more questions. So, and even, in going to the county, they even had said, like, this is not the best. It's the way it's always been done, but it's not the best way. And I love those challenges because I'm like, there can be another way. Let's figure it out. I don't want
Challenge
to wait
accepted.
around. Challenge accepted. Exactly. And we're so lucky. We work closely. So for years prior to starting my nonprofit, I volunteered as the youth advisory board council, their liaison. So I mentored the kids in the community who were part of this board, who were working on substance abuse prevention problems in their school. And I did that because I did it in high school. I'm like, I'll join this group and volunteer. It's great. Well, that evolved into where we are now. And so now we have a council. We have a youth advisory council we pull kids from within our school district, our 3 high schools and our 4 middle schools. And they all come together and they are the ones who direct the work we do. So we do nothing. I do nothing that isn't because it came from the voice of the kid. When there are issues that we want to bring to the school board, it's because there's a kid who has a concern and they need support from adults to help make that known. And so we help them and we go with them, and they're the ones who speak. They're the all-stars. They're the ones that I think they have so many answers. These young kids, they're incredible. They just need somebody to listen and to help really get them the platform so that they can make some change, and to have the adults around them say, we actually really do care, and we're actually going to be really active with what you say. So those 4 questions we've expanded, and it's resulted in some really cool, empowering kid solutions to problems that have been forever.
So wordsofhopeforlife.com is the website. It is with the number 4.
Yeah.
I was going through the website. It's truly incredible. Question for you, though, that I came across. What is Hug Buddy?
So I have one. I will even show you. So in 2020, our biggest task I saw was that I had all of these kids who were so disconnected from their peers, from the world. So everything from, I have a 6-year-old and 11-year-old now. So when we were going through that, I had a 3rd grader and a preschooler.
Wow.
It's like prime social skill time, right? So we had our own solution. I'm so lucky. I'm not I had a group of families, and we had something called the Pod Squad. And every week we had 5 families. So 5 days of the week, those 3rd grade boys, 5 of them. Monday I had a Tuesday, Julie had a Wednesday. We did this, and we kept it very small so that we weren't getting burnt out, but that they were getting different experiences. That was not happening. I was just super lucky that I could have that happen. But even with that, my kids were experiencing this huge disconnect. So we decided, we got to do something else. So my co-founder, Glenn, his son, Avery, he was sending and making these things he called Hug Buddies, which was this cutout piece of paper with arms for a hug to all of his family members, because he couldn't hug them because COVID. And so everyone was isolated. So Glenn's yeah, I feel like you could do something with this. And so I'm challenge accepted. So I kept thinking about it, and I was what if it was a postcard? So I digitized
Look at
this
that.
simple, the simplest little creature on the planet. And we decided, okay, he's going to be our mascot. So before we even started the nonprofit, we had to figure out a way to fund it. So we did a mental health centric clothing line called Viewspire, Views That Inspire. And the Hug Buddy was the art for that. So we put out a really cool clothing line that raised enough money to start this nonprofit. We even had the first mental health NFTs on the blockchain that are the Hug Buddy.
Hey, all right.
Way back, before it was a thing. And so I had no idea what I was doing, but Glenn, he's savvy like that. He's can you make art? I was I can art if you need. So we were really be able to do some cool stuff, but we turned it into a postcard, which this is our 4th generation. We do a new one each year. When we first did it, we sent this out. I'm so lucky to be connected with school districts in Chicago and Ohio and just all around the surrounding areas, different organizations. We self-funded it through the clothing line and sent them out. We sent out 30,000 of these cards to be colored by kids and for them to write positive messages on them. So they colored them. They sent them back to us. We got 25,000 back, which is
Wow.
astronomical. And the thing behind it, so we were like, we're going to use this to create the largest community connecting event ever. So rather than like a one-to-one impact, we wanted a one-to-many. So my idea was, what if we broke a world record? My kids we get the Guinness book every year and, flipping through it. And it had always been a bucket list thing. I'm like, how do people do that? It's very difficult, I have found, and it's expensive. But we thought, what a better way. There's no better way. So I really like this idea. Some people call it like sneaking in the back door for mental health in a way. Like you kind of have to, if I told somebody, come to a mental health event where we're going to, connect the community, nobody's coming. Like nobody's coming to that event. But if I say, help us break this world record, you can be part of it. We had thousands of people come out. We broke the world record for the longest continuous line of postcards with 23,446 cards. So in order to do something like that, we went and we worked with the local school district. And we lined these cards down this huge corridor in one of the larger high schools here. The entire community had to help because you have to lay these cards. And there are rules as about like if they have to touch and how close, and they have to be continuous. You have to have two independent people counting the cards. We had to have time lapse because we couldn't afford to have like an adjudicator come out. So we were like, okay, we got to do it the hard way. And whether you break it or not, like you already gave them the money. So like you really want to make sure you can do it. But it was the most incredible experience. The day before the event, we had community members, volunteers out laying cards, the simplest task. But what we saw happen was exactly what we were hoping. We created a container that connected people all like through every social and economic experience, like situation out here in Walled Lake. It's so different. We have like the kids that rely on school for their meals every week to, the mega mansions on the lakes out here. And so we were like, how do you meet the needs of everybody? Like everybody has a seat at this table. And this was a really cool way to do it. So we broke the record. We had to clean up the cards, right? So we gathered the cards and then we sent out different groups of volunteers and donated those cards to the U.S. Armed Forces across overseas. We went to children's hospitals. We dispersed them. And we have a book of like the 200 really coolest cards. Kids did amazing art with this card. A lot of them are on our website, but it's so neat to see how they've made it across the country. Something as simple as a postcard. We still do this to this day. People can go on our website and we will send you for free Hug Buddy cards. Or if there's somebody that you want to send a hug to, it's me. I will send it. But we get responses to that constantly. And it's been just a really neat kind of fun, funky, whimsical approach to how we brand, really. So we kind of still use him to this day. We do our Hug Buddy postcards at every event that we throw. And again, it's just like another giant kindness project that really helps create a container for community to happen. So he's real fun.
That's awesome. No, that's a really cool thing. And especially during that time period, I'm sure I can only imagine the responses you guys got, especially during COVID when people are stuck in their houses. And at least it's something, even if it's for a few minutes, just for a child. Or, honestly, I would do it. That sounds fun for even adults to just kind of color it in and get creative with their Hug Buddy for a little bit of time, just to take anything to take your mind off of the pandemic for a few minutes. So I thought that's getting
really something in the mail, like
that too.
My
kids
of
course
freak out, and I'm like, I love getting mail, and like, who gets mail anymore? It was a really even the post. Like our post person who would come for pickups was like, this is so cool. Like,
anytime you're getting, even as an adult, anytime you're getting mail, it's not a bill or junk mail. Like, it's still pretty cool.
Like, what is this?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So transitioning here a little bit, we talked about it a little bit and you mentioned it, your organization, you all went out to Oxford High School, after the shooting and offered mental health services to both the survivors and anyone else that was affected. And you did that free of charge, which first off was just truly amazing that you went ahead and did that. Especially now that story, I mean, at the time it was obviously a major national news story. It's now back in the news again as the parents are now standing trial. So I feel like this is a good as time as any to kind of ask, what was that experience like for you all to go out to? You mentioned you had a teacher that was there, so you knew almost immediately, but then to kind of go up there and help pick up the pieces
Yeah.
afterwards. What was that experience like? Because obviously, there's nothing. Doesn't matter what you do in life. There's nothing. There's no handbook to prepare anybody for a mass shooting, especially at a school, especially at a school that is in your backyard, in your local community. So what was that like? That entire experience?
Yeah, I'm so glad we're talking about it because I think it is, it's one of those, it's one of our truth teller superpowers. Like we have to talk about this stuff. Like we really do. I will say that all of us truth tellers, it's hard to be a truth teller. It's emotionally taxing because we see and we feel deeply. But I also think that it really is a superpower. One thing that, and maybe you can relate to this, Dan, but I, in a crisis, that's where I find my baseline. It's when things are chill that I'm like, what's going on here? My therapist Ryan and I, we work on that. But really, I mean, so for us, obviously it hit this area hard. When people say, it's so cliche, like that would never happen here. Like it absolutely can happen here. 100% it can happen here. And it did. I mean, Oxford is one of those.
I would say for those that aren't familiar, Oxford is a, I don't know, it's a fairly well-off area. So it's not like it's an area that you would think would be susceptible to something like that, which is why you say if it can happen there, it truly can happen everywhere. So sorry, I didn't mean to
no.
Just to give people some context as far as that area of the greater Detroit, metroplex, so to say. That was not an area where you would typically expect something like that to happen. So
never. And I'm so glad you said that actually, because this is a community where like you live, you grow up, and you stay there. Like this is generations, the Orion Oxford area is, it's a very tight knit. I mean, there's like a lot, my parents moved us. I grew up in Pontiac, Michigan, which is kind of like definitely like on the lower end of, the socioeconomic plane out here. But, our parents moved us to the Orion Oxford area because it was where you would go for the good schools. It was where you go because we had acres. I mean, it's that kind of a place, like I played on the soccer team with like, the bus driver's kid. I mean, like, it really is one of those places. It was a great place to grow up. I mean, I remember just like riding bikes and sprees in the woods with friends, and you would never worry, if my parents sent me out to go sledding a mile away, like it was never a concern. So really and truly not ever anything you would expect. Just a really safe place to go. We would go out. There's like one movie theater. I mean, it's just, it's a really quaint, really sweet place. And so when something like this happened, the reverberations through the state were huge. My friend Katie, she's the one who messaged me, and she, it's so funny. I love how the universe works, like the right people at the right time. But the second she reached out, like I just immediately called her back, and I'm just like, what do you need? It's the worst feeling to have something happen and not feel like you can do anything. Like that is the hardest thing for me. And I think for most people, like what do you do when you don't know what to do? And this is that situation. They don't teach you this in grad school. Even now, I was just at the Kevin Song conference, which is one of the bigger suicide prevention conferences based out of here in Michigan. And just now there's a formula sort of for how you would do postvention with a school that's experienced some kind of tragedy. And it's like, wow, like we're just not there yet. So she happened to know somebody who ran a wellness center across the street. So directly across the street from Oxford is something called the Legacy Center. It's like my dream to own my own Legacy Center. But it's essentially a community space. It's this old Sea-Doo factory that a bunch of different companies and nonprofits moved into, and it's just like a community hub. People just go there and hang out and just connect. And so she's like, I think we're gonna just open it up to families. Like, will you come? Like 100%, like, yes, we will absolutely come. So we filled we do a lot of community events. So we're like, what can we even bring? Like, what do we even do? So we connected with the therapist we took with us. We all went, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my career, 100%, 10 times over. They opened this up to the community. There was so much media there just trying to get something, because these were kids who, we were talking with kids who had been walking behind the shooter and like watched this all. How do you wrap your head around that? So, we had no idea what we were walking into. They don't train you for this. There was so much adrenaline going into it. I had such concern over the therapist even that I was bringing, because like the secondary trauma of this it's monumental, not just for the families and, the ones that were the day before waiting to hear if their kid was, was okay. So on the way there, we're all just, we were on a call together, just kind of talking through kind of, here are some thoughts, here's some, things maybe, we should keep in mind when we're talking to these kids and these families. It all goes out the window. You get there and it all goes out the window. So we show up and there's a wellness center that offered up their space. They had like treatment areas. So I got to do therapy with a group of kids in this salt room. It was amazing, but it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, hands down. There were families just walking through those doors. So like there's media everywhere outside. So even to just get in, so they had to like deal with that because this was the community. They just wanted to be together. They just wanted to be together. This really cemented even more how much of a need that is in any community. And it's unfortunate that it's not till there's a huge crisis that you really see that. But people just wanted to be together. So, seeing those families walk in was like, it hits you like a ton of bricks. That the amount of pain you just see in someone's face, it's awful. It's heavy. And at a time when there's so much chaos and so many unanswered questions. Football teams in tears, just families. It was there within the Legacy Center. There was even, they had like a racetrack where you could do like the little race cars and stuff. And they had to shut it off because if there were people using it and the car would hit the bumper, it sounded like gunshots. There were people throwing up. It was like, there was a visceral reaction. This is the definition of a fight or flight moment. These folks were in shock. So then to walk in, we cannot fix this. We cannot fix this. There will be no fixing happening here. And so as a therapist, I really just had to go back to the root of everything, which is that sometimes we just need to hold space. Like you cannot fix it, but human connection, that's powerful, so we would, some of our volunteers were there. We bring in all kinds of things that hopefully meet needs of all ages. The elementary school that was very near to the high school was also on lockdown, and those families had no idea. Like if their kids were affected, like they had so many questions. So we had a lot of those elementary kids there too. And something I had been doing in therapy for years. It used to get me in trouble when I worked for this big health system because it was a little messy, but I'm like the vigilante, so it's all good. But we would make these galaxy bottles, and it's a different way to teach mindfulness in kids. And so we had a station set up with therapists and volunteers just to be there, doing something fun, that's relaxing, but then it opens up for conversation. Families would come and pull us therapists that were there. And when I tell you, we were there were like 6 total therapists there that first day. We were able to get some help from Oakland County the next day, but it's like, we were there for days after just because they had no idea how to support these families. But we would get pulled in, like, hey, there's a group of friends here that really just want to talk and process. And so I was in a room with kids who, there was a handful of them that had just walked out of the bathroom right after the shooter did and literally was behind all of this happening. To hear that recounted from a 15-year-old is like, they were in shock. So in that moment, they're talking from like their logic part of their brain, hear the actions of what happened, but you can't even access the emotions at that point. They're trying to process, the emotional center of the brain finishes developing when we're around 9 or 10, but the frontal lobe, the part that runs the whole, like the driver of the bus, they don't come until you're like 25. So then you've got these kids with all of this emotion, but the understanding, you've got a huge gap. And that's where so many problems can exist. So we were letting them process. So we, one by one, they went through and, here's where I was, and this is the text I got. And, this is what, and then parents who were in there just like processing through, what it was like to like not know where their child was. And, I had an incredible honor to work with several families and very, very close friends of several of the kids who had passed. And that was so hard. Kids who left that school that day with blood on them. You cannot formulate words that, are comforting at all in those moments. It's just awful. It's cruel. It's just so cruel for those families and those kids. So we provided support, and we just tried so hard to say, you are having a very appropriate reaction to a very, very extreme situation. And that is going to look different for all kinds of folks. And right then they were just in shock. So we tried to help grounding, and, we knew that this is going to be a road. So a lot of those kids I still see in therapy, and it has profoundly affected them, profoundly. Some of those kids, they are dealing by being advocates and taking action. Some are really struggling. We see like increase in substance use, of course, right? Like how else, and to have a community that they've never had to deal with anything like this ever. No community has until it happens. So even knowing how to support.
I hate to say it so nonchalantly, but how are you supposed to deal with that too? You mentioned with the substance abuse. I mean, how are you supposed to deal with something like that? And I don't mean it in a way of saying like to shake it off or saying it's necessarily okay, but also we're all humans at the end of the day. How are you supposed to deal with that?
Yes. Well, and that's like that gap, right? I talk about this all the time. It's very much, when you're a teenager, you are built and equipped to cope with, we'll say like a baseline of this much stress. And, like we do better or worse some days than others, but if you experience something that requires this much skill and coping, like you're not going to bridge that gap without some kind of intervention. Or when you're a kid, like our brains don't judge. They're like, whatever's going to help me survive right now. It's not thinking long term. It's like, I need to function and feel better this minute. So it's such an easy, everyone wants to just feel better. And to have those really intense feelings, emotions, not know what to do with them is a very appropriate response to a really extreme circumstance. And you're totally right. Things that exist in that gap, lots of different things exist there. Early in my career, I had a lot of experience working with kids who self-harm. And I saw a ton of that with these kids after the crisis. And again, it's just, how do I cope? How do I cope when I don't know what to do? And parents don't know, like, there's no way for us to know. So it was so much, just like post-vention support. And we're still years later, with this past trial, and the mother being convicted on all charges, just having that in the news and the media again, these kids are re-traumatized every time, and it's just like, it goes on forever. There's so much to be said. There's no, I don't think that there's a formula for how you help people after tragedy, because there's nothing that makes it better. The thing I will say is, like, if nothing, well, being there and seeing that community during a time when it, like, literally the worst thing happened, and seeing people just hugging and just being together, like different groups coming together. That was like, it was so inspiring. It was so inspiring. They did this whole wall where in the Legacy Center, all the kids were taking chalk and they were just writing on the walls different messages to each other, memories from the friends that they had just lost. I mean, it was profound. So much so, like I was leaving, like the last day we're there, and I saw in like kid handwriting on the wall, someone had written, "We will be okay." And I just, like, I have it tattooed on me now. Like, it's right.
Oh, wow.
It was like, I just lost it. This was like a 7-year-old. And I'm like, this is far beyond anything. Like the human spirit. I can't say enough about it, but speaking with those kids and just holding space for that kind of pain, there's nothing that'll take it away. But what I will say is that there is a powerful, powerful magnet or magic that happens when we're just with people and we're not trying to make it better. We're just really holding space for wherever they're at.
So one last Oxford question, then we'll move on to some more fun and exciting topics. So you are Nikki the psychologist, but you are also Nikki the human being, and you are Nikki the mother. So now you're going into the situation where, listen, high schoolers like to tell you that they're adults. They like to think they're adults, but they're not. They're kids. They're still kids at the end of the day. And so for you personally, so not only are you there in a professional way as a psychologist and you're there to kind of be that rock to help these people, you're also a mother of 2 kids yourself. So what was that like for you personally as a mother, but also as a psychologist, but also as a mother, and seeing these kids could be your kids and they're going through something like this. What was that like for you personally?
There is 100% a secondary trauma that happens, whether it's, like the folks that were bringing in the donations from Kroger, making sure everybody was fed and just being in that kind of energy. It was the worst. It was the worst. I'm lucky in that I can have a therapist to process things with, and I needed it. I really needed it. And I think sometimes too, folks in helping professions, like, we get real good at having that compartmentalizing and being able to separate. But I'm so glad that you said, like, we're still human. And oftentimes, and I am so fall into this. Sometimes I have to be so careful of pretending that like maybe I can just separate it. Like, you can't. You absolutely cannot. It hit very, very hard. Thinking, and even in the days and weeks following, having to go and drop my kids off at school, I mean, there's no way to explain like the heart-wrenching what if. This didn't happen in my school. This didn't happen to my kids, and it didn't have to for it to have that much of a huge impact. We had to do a lot of processing following, and we still do with the therapists that we took with us, because having to be and sit with that kind of heavy trauma is really, really difficult. And if we can't also admit like we're affected, regardless of if we're trained or if we're not, like you're right, it does not matter. That is something that is just like, it changed me. I mean, it really, really, I don't know how it couldn't for a parent in a situation, but especially hugging parents that had lost a child. Like, you cannot, I'll never be able to formulate words for what that's like. I think too, being that we're the truth tellers, like we don't want to pretend it's okay. Like, I don't want to pretend it's okay because I know it's not okay. There's nothing that'll make that okay. And I'm so glad that you said that, because it profoundly, I mean, I think in the weeks that followed, my anxiety and hypervigilance was like insane. And I really had to take some steps back to try to, sort of give myself the support that I also know that I needed just as much as the people that we were supporting. yeah, again, it was the hardest thing I probably will ever do in my career.
So one of the things you all did with Words of Hope for Life was you donated over 500 Galaxy bottles and led the students through the experiment of creating their own Galaxy bottle and mindfulness practice. What are Galaxy bottles? I know you brought it up a little bit earlier, but what exactly are Galaxy bottles?
So we're so lucky to be as connected as we are. Diversified Members Credit Union is a credit union based in Metro Detroit. They donated funds for us to do this. They had it was like no question. They were just like, absolutely. We will, like, what do you guys need? And so my thought, I was like, oh my gosh, well, for years in therapy, I'm very much, especially when I work with kids, you can talk at them all day, but it's not until you really connect through an experience that real support, I think, sometimes can happen, especially in a situation like this. We needed an intermediary activity or something that could be there that could help people connect safely, even if they didn't want to talk. And so I was like digging through my bag of tricks, like what are the things we could do here? And one of my favorite ones is the Galaxy bottles. They're like all over Pinterest now. It's like a big thing. They're super fun. But you know, what started as like me in an office with a water bottle, we use like fancy bottles now, but back in the day, it was just these water bottles that I was finding that we were giving out in the lobby of the therapy office, and that I would buy in bulk clear glue and glitter and water. The more clear glue you add, the slower the glitter falls, right? So you're mixing it up and it's like this galaxy jar. It looks like a galaxy. The kids get to pick. And so it was like a buffet. They put it together. But the goal there wasn't just that they're like making this really fun lava lamp looking thing, but we were teaching them about grounding and mindfulness without having to make it super high level. You know, so we talked about, you know, one thing that they didn't need to know this part of it for it to be valuable. But when we're experiencing heightened emotion, our body needs time to metabolize that cortisol, the stress hormone, out. And sometimes, you know, if you see little kids coloring and they kind of like their tongues are out and they're like really focusing, they're in a meditative zone. Like we've probably experienced that too. Like if you've ever driven somewhere and you're like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? It's because our brain, like we are wired to need this recharge. And so I find that something as simple as these glitter jars that we sort of add just enough glue so they take about 2 minutes to settle, because for a lot of folks, that's just enough time for our blood pressure to regulate again. But all they did was they were shaking it up, and we just kind of taught them, you know, like if you're just staring and breathing a little as that glitter falls, see how you feel after. And maybe you'll do that before bed. Maybe mom and dad can do that with you and you guys can, you know, take some breaths together just to reground. So it was a fun way to teach a really important trauma management skill. So we brought those in, and some of the kids that come to our events still have them, and they're like, I still have my glitter jar. And I love that so much, because I don't think, mental health and the way that we teach it to our kids shouldn't be high level. It should be it should just be like, it should be a no-brainer. It should be simple. And I think there are so many ways we can do that. And I love that we could have done that there. We also did t-shirts, our Words of Hope shirts, and we had the kids, anybody who wanted them, and they did this on their own, but we brought in all these Sharpie markers and they just started writing on each other. Like all the football team was wearing on the front pages of the Oakland Press. There was a kid in one of our shirts, and on the back, he had just written like, you know, R.I.P. Hannah. And, you know, it was powerful, and they all were just like writing these messages of love to each other. And it was a neat way to connect. And they're going to look back and they're going to have memories of trauma. I also hope they look back and see the people that really loved them and that they bonded with, unfortunately, on something so traumatic. And again, like we weren't going to make that better, but we wanted to be there to hold space for that.
Well, also on top of that too, you are putting on a really cool event here coming up in July in Detroit with Words of Hope for Life. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about that event, what you all are hoping to accomplish with it. And also, I understand that as part of the event, you're trying to you mentioned Guinness Book of World Records earlier. You're trying to set a pretty cool record with this event as well.
So we are. This is very exciting. The thing that comes from, I love when pain turns to passion. And this is like the biggest example. I lost my dad a year ago, like I said, to like this lifelong battle with opiates. And it's the harm reduction movement has just become so vital and important. There's a reason that we still have the problems that we do. And it's because we have to do this different. We just really do. And meeting people where they're at is critical. So we're super lucky to work in a community where we do have a few of the Oakland County officials, like the local government, that is very, very supportive of the out of the box work we do. And so they came to us and they had us collecting opioid data from youth, which nobody's ever done. Like actually going out in the community and asking kids questions about their experiences. And what we found was like such a need for education. But the other piece of it was that they said, how do we inform people about Narcan? Like, this saves lives. How do we do that? And how do we do it in a way that doesn't foster or perpetuate a stigma? And that's like my jam. I was like, let me get a hold of that one. We are part of the Alliance, which we help maintain all of our Save a Life boxes through our communities. So those are the ones that if other communities have them or maybe are going to have them soon, they're like old newspaper boxes where there's like free Narcan, fentanyl testing strips, and some other things in there for harm reduction. And they pop up in communities. The problem is no one knows what they are. No one knows what Narcan is. Or they're not familiar with it. They don't know what to do with it. So we were like, oh, we got this. So we hold this huge event every year. This is our 4th year. We partner. We have so many incredible organizations that help us pull this stuff off. And this year we're going real big. So this year we are working with Guinness again because, one time wasn't enough. We want to be in. So we're in the 2023 book, and now we will be in the 2025 book because we're breaking the world record for the most amount of people receiving Narcan training at one time. So we're going to do that at the Detroit Zoo on July 14th. The coolest part about it is it's free this year. Like, we always have had to at least minimally charge the zoo entrance because that's what they charge for us. But I have spent months and I am still spending time making sure that this event is accessible to everyone. We're going to do a mass training. We are working with Guinness. They're so excited. This is not anything that's ever been done before. Everybody who participates in the record will leave with Narcan. And if they didn't want to participate in the record, that's okay. Because throughout the event, there are walk-up stations where you can get trained to use Narcan, and you get to take it home and just have it with you. So a lot of the school districts, different companies and things, it's a perfect opportunity to get trained. It's a very simple training, but it's also a really incredible way for us to get national attention. I want other people to beat us. Like, I want to set a record, and I want other people to come and I want them to beat that record. I think that's a really cool way to use, like viral culture and things to put a message out there, but also stigma breaking. So we're catching the attention of a lot of our local sports teams and things who want to participate. We're so lucky to work with as many of the local NAMI chapter, Suicide Prevention Network, Family Against Narcotics, a ton of different entities are going to come together to help make this possible. They'll all have a presence at the event also. And we do something a little different. So every entity that participates in the event, who either is hosting a table or something like that, has to in some way have an experience associated with whatever they're doing. So for example, Detroit Institute of Children brings a really cool sensory area that people of all ages can kind of come and experience. Dean Transportation donates a school bus and lets me turn it into a Zen den. Super fun. So I put a ball pit in the back. It's essentially that, it's The View Fest, that is our Warp Tour. So it's an experience that you're going to go and you will literally improve your mental health, but it's also now a free zoo day. Partnering with the zoo has been huge because yes. And it's
How about
so
that? Exactly.
right. And it's so interesting. There are so many families that could not otherwise afford like a zoo day like that. So not only are we creating a container for community to happen, but we're also putting the perfect vetted resources and people and experiences in one place. And not only that, we're also going to break this record, which is going to be massive. So we're still looking for folks who want to participate local and, statewide, nationally. We've got a lot of really cool folks who will be there. Starbucks will be there that day, which is fun. So they bring coffee for everybody. We usually have, last year it was over 200 different organizations participating. You leave with like a gazillion freebies. We run our Words of Hope for Life station that we fundraise for, where kids can come through and make their own coping kit. So we have a fidget buffet and they get to go through and they kind of get to piecemeal together different kind of coping tools that I use in my office, but they get to take those home for free. There's all kinds of different activities in that tent too that we hope people experience, and maybe they leave with a new coping tool or a new skill, or maybe they met someone. The amount of people who come and they're like, I met a therapist for the first time and they're not scary. And I'm like, yay, like we're not that bad. Like it's awesome. And so that too, those partnerships, even seeing the different organizations, the amazing synergy that has come from them being able to work together in this world of nonprofit work and wellness. We all exist in these silos, and ViewFest is we're really uniting regardless of like what area of business, whether it's a tree service, we do have a tree service, Davy Tree Service that comes out every year, or a bus company or a large healthcare industry. We all have a shared mission. And this year we all have a shared goal of people being trained on Narcan, whether you're in a school, whether you fly for, an airline, whatever it is, that's where we can meet together. And so that's what we're really hoping to see big time. And it's just going to be fun.
So of course, wordsofhopeforlife.com is where you can go to get tickets if you are in the Detroit area. For those who, because we have people all over who watch and listen to this podcast. So for those who may not be able to get to Detroit for that event, but would still like to support the cause, so to say, are there ways that they can do that?
So if you go to ViewFest 2024, there is an opportunity to donate, which will help provide even more of those free tickets to make this available for everyone. And all of the people that are, whether you're participating in person or you're just supporting the, our movement here, there's lots of ways to do that. We have a calendar that we put out that has our Hug Buddy on it. That'll be up on our website pretty soon. It's just another fun way to feel connected and involved. It will be aired on a few different news stations that we're working out some details for right now. So even just sharing the information on social media is huge for us because one, it gets people asking, what is Narcan? Like, what is this? Like, what can I learn? We'll also have lots of resources there for people all across the United States to locally be able to find, where would I get trained on Narcan? How would I get Narcan if I needed it? It's kind of one of those, like, just have it. You may never need it. I hope you never need it. But it's the people who will need it that can really save some cool lives. So, yep. So still go to ViewFest 2024. If you have, if you are part of an organization or a company that's really, that this is maybe one of your platforms, reach out to me. I do a lot of in-service and educational talks and things for some of the bigger companies to have, and again, like spread awareness or mental health messaging, self-care, all of that good stuff. But it's another way, for us to get the word out about what we're doing. And again, there's tons of sponsorship opportunities. You'll see that on the website too. If you want to have, if you want to be a part of it, if you're connected to a company or something that, would really like to contribute and be a part of that, please, please, please do. We do a huge billboard campaign that'll come up in June. If you want to have like a really cool opportunity to be part of a world record and also do something really, really awesome for the world and social change, this is the one.
No, that's so awesome. Once again, the website is wordsofhopeforlife.com. That is with the number 4. The event is ViewFest. Nikki, this was amazing. I can't thank you enough for coming on today. This was truly fantastic. Thank you so
I
much.
appreciate it. Dan, I cannot thank you enough. Anytime I get the opportunity to talk to someone who like really, really gets it, it's just so awesome. I think more of this and more of what you do and, you know, what we are all doing right now is really how we make a shift happen. So thank you for doing what you do.
All right, that'll do it for this episode of the Addiction Help Podcast. Thank you so much once again to Nikki for joining me today. Thank you also all of you out there who continue to follow along with us on this podcasting journey that we have been going on here at the Addiction Help Podcasting Network. Obviously, we love your continued support here on the flagship show, Addiction Help Podcast. Also, please don't forget about our other shows we have on the network. Victor Over Vice's podcast, which is our sports adjacent show, hosted as well by yours truly. And then, of course, Lights of Recovery, hosted by our editorial director, Jessica Miller, where she sits down one-on-one with people in the sober community and has them share their truly inspiring stories with us. So please continue to like, subscribe, rate, and review. We have YouTube channels set up for all 3 of our shows. You can also find those for those of you who like listening to the podcast audio medium more traditionally. You can also find all of our shows there on not just Spotify, but anywhere else you get your podcast. So please continue to subscribe to our feeds, share with your loved ones. And as always, I like to take a minute here at the end of every show to remind everyone that if you or a loved one is struggling, whether it be addiction or mental health issues or both, because many people out there do struggle with both, please, please, please go seek proper help. Please go seek professional help. If you are unsure where to get started on your recovery journey, addictionhelp.com has some great resource pages. They also have great information as far as getting that process started and learning more about different addictions, different mental health conditions, so that you can be better informed, not just you, but also your loved ones, so everyone can help you out along with that journey, because we want everyone to be happy. We want everyone to be healthy. And we want everyone to enjoy their lives as much as they possibly can. So that'll do it for today. Have a good one, and we'll talk to you next time. See you later, everybody.